What's up? Welcome to the unofficial Tedeschi Trucks podcast. This is episode number 73, and I am Adam Choi. To follow this show, it's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram, and on YouTube, just search Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. That is my channel. Please be sure to subscribe on YouTube, and however you listen to this show, that's appreciated. I'm at Adam Choi on Instagram if you want to follow me, and it's the same on Twitter. I also have another podcast that's called People We Love, and what I do with that one is interview people from all walks of life, most often comedians and other entertainment types about their lives and careers. It's casual conversation, but I also ask everyone to highlight the people they love and who've inspired them over the years. That's been fun. Definitely check that out too, at People We Love Podcast on Instagram and peoplewelovepodcast.com. There's a website for that one. So for today's episode of this podcast, we have the son of the legendary Sarode maestro, Ali Akbar Khan, a Sarode virtuoso himself, Alim Khan. Alim's performance career was introduced to the world when he began accompanying his father on stage, and Alim's inner voice began to emerge and grow with his ensuing solo career. Following in his father's footsteps, Alim is now the head of instrumental studies at the Ali Akbar College of Music, and has dedicated his life to preserving, performing, and teaching the style of Indian classical music to the world. And we cover this musical journey, of course, highlighting his recording of These Walls with Tedeschi Trucks Band. And we talk about him having the chance to perform the song live with the band as well. But let's just get started. Here's Alim Khan. So it's good to see you today, Alim Khan. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. How are you holding up during whatever year this is?
Yeah. It's it continues to be challenging, but making music, so that's good.
Oh, for sure. We can get right into it and tell me about your background and your story, kind of where you grew up, your family. I know you have music in your family is a big part of things, so I'll kind of let you get into your background, and we'll go through your musical journey, and of course get to Derek and Susan when they become part of it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm born and raised here in the Bay Area, in Marin County, which is across the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. And my father is from India and my mother is American. So I'm half and half. And my father is passed, but he was a very, very famous Indian classical musician. And his name was Ali Akbar Khan. And he and Ravi Shankar, the sitar maestro, came from India and brought this music to the West first and popularized it. So that's why everyone knows about the sitar and sarod and Indian classical music. I play the sarod, which is the same instrument my father played. And my grandfather is the one that trained both my father and Ravi Shankar and numerous other very well-known Indian classical musicians, and kind of revolutionized the music. And that's kind of why our style of the classical music from India, which we call Gharana, like a family style, is the one that was first the most popularized, and is probably still to this day, I would say, is the most well-known. So it all comes from my family, and my father established the Ali Akbar College of Music here in the Bay Area in 1967. And it's kind of been it has been a mecca, a hub for Indian classical music, and a melting pot in which generations of people have been able to come through and experience the music, study the music with my father, and go off into their different, circuits and their different worlds and places that they live, and share what they learned, either as classical musicians doing pure Indian classical music, or taking on the influence and sharing and incorporating that into this style of music that they play. So a lot has been done over the last, 50, I think our 52nd year as a music institution. And so much has been contributed to music in general through my father coming and establishing the school. And so many bands have been influenced in people's lives. And I wouldn't be alive if my father hadn't come from India and, met my mother, who was a student at our school at the time. And I'm a product of that. So I'm a product of these cultures bridging, people, and my father, emigrating here. So I've been steeped in both cultures my whole life. I grew up listening to all different kinds of music. So, but having a father of the stature of mine, a master, the master that he was, people often compared him to like an easy way for Western audiences to understand. They called him like the Bach of India, basically. So, that's that kind of level, Bach, Beethoven, that kind of thing of India. So having that as a kid, you ease into it. It's more of like, I'm the son of this person, and but I like Nirvana, like different bands like that, like rap music. And I played classical, but it wasn't until I was a teenager that I took it very seriously and ended up devoting my whole life to that. And really understood the weight of the lineage that I came from, good and bad. It's a blessing and a curse because it's a lot of responsibility, but there's a lot of power in that music. And I'm blessed I must have done something to put me in this place, in this life, right?
Very cool. I appreciate you sharing the background and give me some of the background and broad information, because to be forthright, of course, as you might gather, I am not an expert on the history of Indian classical music, the Sarode instrument, or the sitar itself. What are those instruments behind you exactly that I'm seeing?
So behind me, this is like kind of like a mini sarod. It's actually called a dotar. So it's kind of basically just like a small one, basically, with less strings and stuff. And this here is this is a tanpura, which is like a drone instrument. So even on these walls, I believe I think they have a drone playing. It might be an electric version of this, like a pre-recorded one. I don't remember exactly. Or I may have played it and sent it to them. I don't remember. But it's a drone basically, and that's to create the ambiance of the atmosphere sonically. So you have the tonic that you're playing to, so the key of what you're doing. And it also, with our instruments, they go out of tune very frequently. So they're always needing to be adjusted. They don't have like guitar tuners and different things that hold them in place better. Their temperature, all kinds of stuff is always making them tweak. So you have to have something to tune to make sure that there's constantly that tonic is being like, surrounded all the time. So that's basically the role of the tanpura. It's very important.
It reminds me of this when you're talking about tuning. I remember hearing this Ravi Shankar. I think it was him playing at Madison Square Garden, and all he did was tune his instrument, and that got like a standing ovation just from doing that, because it had such a unique sound, and it seemed like that took labor involved in tuning it.
Yeah, that's that recording where he goes, or it might have been there or Monterey Pop. I think he must have said
one of those.
He must have said it a few times where he's like, if you enjoyed the tuning so much, hopefully you'll enjoy the music.
Right, but exactly.
That is what we do, right? We don't have roadies going out beforehand and tuning up your instruments, and it kind of like sits well enough to play the songs and the style of music that people are playing. Like ours is so much on the singular melodic phrasing and being a soloist that like you constantly have to be making little tweaks. Like you wouldn't even notice while we're playing that we're just constantly adjusting. It's like you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I got a little something on my neck or my shoulder or my leg. Like you just adjust your body throughout the day. It's just like that. You're doing that with your instrument constantly.
Interesting. Yeah, you were saying how you kind of got serious about the Indian classical music when you were in your later teens, and you mentioned also you were into Nirvana and rap music and other musics. I'm kind of curious what you remember about like even being like elementary school aged. Like where were you like musically? What do you remember about like your father's influence with his music, and like what kind of music were you into? Like from like where your early like what's your early musical life? Like when you were a kid?
Yeah, well, I was brought up around the music, and when I was a little kid, I would sing, I would take vocal classes because that's kind of the first thing that we teach in Indian music in the classical system. It's like learn to sing a bit first, and then everything you're doing in your life with your instrument, it's coming from inside, so you've internalized it and it's coming out through your instrument, so you should be able to sing that, to at least to some degree. So I took vocal lessons with my father. He used to teach us in the group classes my whole life. So I learned the singing style of Indian classical music as well as the instrumental. So I was doing that on and off. I would be into it, I'd be out of it. Really what was going on when I was in elementary was grunge music. Like that Nirvana had just come out with Nevermind. And I say Nirvana because they're still one of my favorite bands. So I was listening to Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and then Smashing Pumpkins, and then like later on in middle school, like Green Day and all those kind of pop bands, and later on like Tool and progressive kind of rock kind of bands and stuff like that. Like I listened to all of that, and I listened to rap music too. Back in the day and when I was little, and then I stopped, didn't really listen to it as much when I was into more of the rock stuff. And then after the rock stuff started to feel a little more too commercial, I got into like very obscure, independent, too commercial also, rap hip hop music. So I'd say I listened to a lot of music, but throughout that, I played the instrument, the sarode, and I took classes, but I would pick it up and I would just kind of, my parents got me a guitar, and I had a band and I would play guitar, and we'd cover these songs like Offspring and Green Day and Nirvana and all that stuff. And it was fun. And then, something just clicked. I was doing during one of those times where I was learning again, something clicked, and learning on the sarode, and I started to hear the music in a whole different way. And it really impacted me. It was very deeply impactful. Like I remember just being haunted by the sound. Like it was like I never heard it truly. Like I was listening to it, but I couldn't hear it. Or I could hear it, but I wasn't really listening to it. It's like when I finally heard it, then I recognized it as being something like home or like a friend or something, like something I had known. And then I fell deeply in love and was very serious about music. And, my father and who he was as a musician took on a whole new form for me. And it was like, oh my God, this is my father, but he's one of the most incredible musicians on the planet. The power he had in his hands when he played, it was like otherworldly, not like anything else. So once I finally understood that, and I heard the calling of my lineage and tradition, and I was one of the next in line and all that stuff, I fully went into that role and started touring with my father. And I got out of I didn't even go to high school. I went to high school for freshman year, sophomore year, but I did independent study high school so I could get all my work, my homework, and then go on the road with my father around the world. And we'd tour for 3 months, and I would bring all my schoolwork and I would do that and come home. And I did that for a couple of years. And then the people at school said, you don't want to be in school. Like, what are you going to do with it? Like, you're a musician. Like, just get out, take the proficiency exam or whatever and get out. And I did. So I've been a musician ever since. And yeah.
I got you. I'm gonna jump around a little bit, but what do you remember about like growing up with your dad? Was there a moment where you realized that he's not just dad and he's this super famous, innovative, musician, or was he always dad, or was he a famous musician even before dad? Like what was that like to kind of like, that perspective as a kid?
They were always tied together, but he was always dad first. But he was also a very famous musician, and people in India, whenever Indian people were around, it was like he was a god, because he really was. He's still thought of as like a god in human form of music. So in that sense, it's hard for a child to really understand that, and there's no social media back then. There's no internet. There's no like, he's famous on the internet. It's like, there was none of that stuff. It's just like in India, he's this crazy thing. And even here in the States, everybody's coming to be around him all the time. And he's very famous here too. So, I used to tell my friends, my father's a famous musician from India. And they'd be like, his dad's a famous musician. And that was kind of it. And then
Yeah.
he played concerts and it was like, oh, it's classical music. And it was like, I want to hear what's on the radio, on MTV. So that was the kind of thing. So it really wasn't until I was a teenager that all of a sudden it clicked, and I heard it and I was like, wow, what is this? It's taking me to the place that all these other musical forms are taking me to, that I wanted to hear. And I was trying to get out of that, but taking me to a much deeper place and showing me a different way of connecting to that source. So
Interesting. How did your parents react to you getting into Nirvana and alternative rock and all that stuff? It sounded like they were somewhat supportive if they're buying you a guitar and encouraging you to be in bands and stuff. Were they like, these crazy kids, what are they listening to these days? Was it any of that? Or were they always just like, it's cool that he's open to different things?
my mom was a hippie, basically. So my father was a much older man, from a much older time period. And he had been married before and had other children. And when he came here and he met my mother, she was much younger, and she was an American white woman who listened to Crosby, Stills and Nash and Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. So it was like, but she also fell in love with the Indian music and my father, and also studied tabla, the Indian percussion drum, for 25 years with some of the best players, masters on the planet. And my father was just happy that I was into music. And so they probably talked his parents and said, he likes this a lot, get him a guitar. And so my father was supportive and just, whatever. Even if I showed interest in Indian music, he liked it, never forced me for any of those things. And it was very casual in that sense, unlike my father's upbringing.
Yeah. It sounds like it was kind of like a slow burn, a gradual thing in terms of you starting to get serious with the Indian classical music and the Sarode. It was just you getting better at being more around your dad, becoming more of a young man as a teenager. Was it like a moment or something that like clicked for you where you can remember be like, okay, I'm seriously into this now? Or is it just something very gradually and kind of maybe like one day you just woke up and I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm hardcore about.
It was when I started to, one of those times that I was playing the instrument more again, I was kind of getting into it again. And I already had a number of times before. I really just, what happened was my mother was like, I want to play Sarode too. So she's like, let's do it together. I didn't know in my mind, my mom was tricking me because she wanted to try to get me into the Sarode more. But as a kid, I didn't know what the hell was going on. But my mom was being a mom and was like, let's try this out. So she did. And then she played, and then she was like, kind of just disappeared. She's like, I'm not going to do that because she wasn't really planning on doing that long term. But I, like a parent pushing a kid on a bike, I was like, see ya. And I just kept going because I'd already been playing here and there. And this time I could pick it up way faster. So my mom's kind of like going away, and I'm just like, and I never stopped. And then what was happening was I was listening to these recordings of my father at the time, some of the same ones that Derek fell in love with. And I was listening to those recordings, and it clicked. It was I don't know, it was one recording. There is one recording in particular, I think is the one, if my memory serves me right. But it was that time period. I just started to hear it differently. It's like, you have to, some things you hear and you just know right away. And some things it takes time for you to kind of like mature your ear or be able to let it in. Like if you're looking at a picture or a painting or something, you may see it and go, that's cool, that's nice. But if you know something about painting or art or dimensions or whatever it is, I'm just using it as an example, you would appreciate on a whole nother level or multitude of levels what's going on in that picture, right? Same with music. If you're like listening to music and playing it, and then you start to hear things you didn't before, and your ear is actually maturing and growing. And then at that time, it was just fertile and ready to hear that recording. And it was just like magic. It was like I said, all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, it got me. And everything I was hearing in grunge or whatever kinds of music, rock or Hendrix or whatever it was just like all coming in. And it was like, maybe it's already in my DNA and whatever. And it felt like home to me. And it was like, this is it. I heard the calling. and I committed myself at that time,
Very cool. That's the one thing I love about like art and music. There's like no limit on the depths of how much you can appreciate it, and on the different levels and in different ways. And there's always something new to learn and something new that you're going to notice or hear in art or music. And that's just so cool. Like that's how you could keep on watching the same movies over and over again and noticing different things and hearing same songs over and over again and hearing different things or hearing different versions live. There's new ways to take on different things. It's just like the appreciation is limitless. And I think that's amazing. Tell me more about like, I guess what would consider for most people their high school years or high school age years. You were already out of school and touring. You were touring with your dad. That was the first time you kind of toured with him in your late teens?
Well, yeah, I mean, as a person that was involved in the music, yes, I had already been, traveling around the world since I was like 2 years old. But if like I would go, my mother would bring me on tour with my father for periods of time. But it was when I was, a teenager that I started, actually not this one, but a smaller one. I started playing this instrument on stage with my father, which is usually what people do, is they play this instrument with their guru, their teacher, when they're performing. And you start out that way. And then it went from that to playing actually Sarode and accompanying my father on Sarode on stage. So that was when I was 14, 15 onward till the end of my father's life, basically.
Was that fun? Was that a lot of pressure on you? Was that both? Was kind of like the daily grind or the life like for you personally on that journey?
Yeah, it was all those things, I mean, the pressure was something that was building, because as I learned more and I saw the world that he was from and what it meant to take all this on and interact with people, that pressure, it started to manifest and have a take on a shape, and so, but it was also very enjoyable because I was with my father. I was on the road, I wasn't home anymore with a kid at home with their parents living a conventional life. It was exciting. I got to see, new places, and it was exciting. It was a special time. And, that just kind of matured and changed over time into what it is, and to the time where I wasn't touring with my father and it was just me. And then the pressure takes on a different role, or it's grown into another thing. And, the excitement of being on the road is necessarily the same. And it's, it all just kind of changes over time, and you kind of comes into focus what's important to you and what you want it. And,
Yeah, it sounds like you went all over the world like before you were 20 years old. Do I have that right? I mean, where have you been? I mean, where did you go with your father touring? With America, India, like all over, or where?
I mean, with my father, I mean, around the world, in the sense, not everywhere in the world by any means, but around the world, we went all over Europe, America, Canada, but that's over here. So America, Canada, Europe, and then India. Besides that, we didn't go to other, my father used to do some touring in Australia, and earlier in the days, like in the 50s, he used to spend a good amount of time in Japan. But I think he played in Africa, but that was never a big audience base over in Africa. Nowadays, I think it's a little different, but in South America, there wasn't really any touring. So some places have never been hot spots, although nowadays with the internet and with time just passing, there are pockets of really dedicated either listeners and lovers of the music and also practitioners of the music pretty much all over the planet. But for me, it was mainly Europe, India, the US, that kind of thing.
Besides, being with your father, and what else might jump out at you from those early years touring, as far as, I guess, highlights or whatnot? Any places that were your favorite or anything like that?
Just so many. I mean, just lots of images in my head come back to this as a young man, kind of becoming a man and seeing how the world is and how people are of different cultures. I mean, they all had their special qualities. It's there's not one over the other. I'm never good at choosing favorites, or I'm definitely a man of moods. So it's like, what fit for the time, or it's you can't eat one food every day. I mean, I guess you could, but you got to experience different things, and they work in that way. So it definitely helped me with my perspective of the world and different cultures and people in general, and not just being like American or all American. I mean, I never could have been anyway, because I'm mixed race anyway. So it's like I never was like, even though a lot of my friends were like white kids and stuff like that, I never really fit into that, and I never really fit into fully Indian stuff either. I'm a different thing, There weren't as many mixed people that I've noticed also, and nowadays I realize as being an adult that hopefully I can be that way for more people that are mixed race, because being mixed is a whole nother thing on top of all other kinds of things of living. It's like you have all these different things you're being pulled between, and you're living between worlds essentially.
Oh, well, tell me about, we'll continue on the journey. Like, you're touring with your dad. I guess you're going to be in your early 20s in the next part of your life. Where do we kind of go from there with your life and music career?
Just continue touring with him until he stopped touring, and then and just playing solo concerts myself and going on solo tours, establishing myself as an Indian classical musician and the son of my father and grandson of my grandfather. It's a big lineage. So establishing myself as that, letting people know who I was, my music, and what I could do. And it's just continuing until today. Although today I do more things than just classical. Back then I was very pure classical. I didn't really mix things together, which I do a lot more of now. Yeah, just touring, getting used to everything, establishing myself, and that's kind of, a lot of things have happened since then, but that's pretty much what's been going on. And my father passed he passed in 2009. And this year, actually on Thursday, is his 100th birthday, what would be his 100th birthday. So this year is a huge year of centennial celebrations and musical tributes to my father, and concerts and a book and all kinds of stuff we're doing. So there's a lot going on right now, actually, in relation to all that. So
that's great. Was there any doubt that this would be your career path and your life's calling? Was there any question early on, this classical music, this music is not for me. I'm going to go to law school, medical school. I'm going to be a teacher. Was there any doubts or any other career paths or paths for you that you were considering? Or it sounds like this is like always been your calling.
Yeah, no, it's always been music. But with the pandemic and everything, it definitely makes people think like, be cool if I could have had a high-paying job that I could work remotely from home. That's, but I didn't even finish high school, right? So I kind of committed at an early age to like, I'm doing music. Like I would have a doctorate or something, right? In music or whatever it would be. But in Indian music, we don't really do those kinds of things. We don't give those kinds of degrees out and stuff. So I'm committed to being to music. That's my life.
Great. Tell me, I guess we can kind of continue on your musical journey. You kind of talked about what you were into, but bridge the gap between what you were working on in your 20s and early 30s, whatever, to connecting with Derek and Susan, and how these walls came together, and working with them.
Sure. So Phil Lesh of the Grateful Dead had a concert that he did every year, I believe, called Phil Lesh and Friends or something like that. And it was at a performing arts center here in Marin County called the Civic Center. And Derek and Susan were there. Dave Crosby was there. Michael Tilson from the San Francisco Symphony conductor was there. There was a bunch of musicians. Maybe Carlos Santana was there. I don't remember. There was a lot of people. And I was invited to open and close the night with a alap performance. Alap is when you're the section of Indian classical music where there's no drums. It's just kind of like it's not as simple as saying an intro, because it can go on for 30 minutes, actually 45 minutes. It's just a whole repertoire that you do involving no drums. The tambura drone is playing, but it's just you and that instrument. And that instrument is just simply strumming the strings over and over to create that ambience. So I did that. And when I was there doing that, well, a little backstory to that, the Grateful Dead also were based here in the Bay Area, and they used to spend a lot of time at our music school. And Mickey Hart and Jerry Garcia, all of them, they used to do these all-night concerts, and they would do fundraisers, and they used to do fundraisers for our school. And they would listen to my father all the time. And, you know, Mickey has said numerous times that the Grateful Dead wouldn't be the Grateful Dead if it wasn't for my father and the Ali Akbar College of Music. And, you know, they would stay up all night listening to my father's music. And it was a really rich, culturally beautiful time here in the Bay Area. And Carlos Santana would be around and all these musicians. And, you know, I've played with Bob Weir later on in life now, and I performed for Phil Lesh, and I've known Mickey the longest. We used to go to his house for different functions. And Zakir Hussain, the master percussion tabla player, was in a group with Mickey Hart, and Zakir also was the teacher of tabla at our school during those days. So all these things are connected, right? And the Bay Area was a really rich musical kind of thing going on. So years later, in my teen years, Phil invited me to play, and I met Derek and Susan backstage, or on the stage before the concert had started. And they introduced themselves, and Derek said, you know, I guess we were teens. I mean, probably late teens. Maybe Derek's a few years older than me, I think. So maybe he was 20 something. I don't remember, but he was like, hey man, like Derek and I, you know, I love Indian music, and I love your father's music. And this is my girlfriend, Susan, and she got me a Sarode. And I was like, no way. And it was a Sarode made by the last great, the most well-known Sarode maker. And he actually died a couple months after my father died. And he was like incredible. Hemendra Sen, and from Calcutta, India. And Susan had bought him one as a birthday present. And we got to talking, and he told me that, you know, he would, I don't know if it was then or later on, but he would come to the college, our music school in Marin County, whenever they had breaks in tour dates. And he would just come and sit in on class. This is back in the Tedeschi Trucks Band days, you know, with Jan Rico and Todd Smalley, yeah, exactly. He's a nice guy, yeah. And Kofi. And you know, this is the early Tedeschi Trucks. I think maybe they had just made the first album, and it was nice. Derek's such a nice guy. Susan was so nice, and we just became friends. You know, we just became friends, and we've been friends ever since. And it wasn't until years later, like they invited me to play at their wedding, I remember, and I couldn't do it for some reason. And you know, we just kept in touch. And it wasn't till way later that we worked on something together. But Derek used to say he would come in and sit on the classes my father would teach and just like watch. And he'd just be like, he loved Indian classical music. He loved my father's playing. He still does. He just texted me the other day about a recording. And it's like, I know it affected him deeply in his musical journey, and musicians that he looked up to and that were in his world that he respected, you know, put him on to my father's music because they liked it too. So it all kind of, you know, it was all just a nice cosmic kind of meeting of people. And I used to go, and when Derek was in town, I would go and check out his Tedeschi Trucks Band, and we'd hang out on the tour bus. And every time I'd see Derek, you know, this is the thing about Derek is he isn't like an encyclopedia for music. He would just, every time we'd meet, he's like, oh, I've been listening to this and this and this and this and all these people. And I didn't know half the people he was talking about, but he was so passionate about music and musicians, you know, and different albums and things that were influencing him. And we just talk about that for hours and talk about Indian music and similarities or things about, the music that he was playing and Indian music. And yeah, that's kind of how it started.
That's cool. Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah, I guess I mean, how would I know? But I didn't know that you guys go back so far. I'm just like, oh, I just figured, oh, they need a Sarode player on these walls. Let's call Ali Akbar Khan's son, and he plays, so let's get him. But that's
Yeah.
so cool that you have such a history with Susan and Derek, and that you were,
We
hanging
were
out with
friends.
them at the school and all that.
Yeah, we were friends before anything, that was the music thing was making music just came later. It was just kind of like two musicians that didn't play any music together, but just hung out and talked about it all the time. Like that's every time I'd see him, I'd go to their concerts and we just talk about it. But Derek, I think there was a article that came out, Rolling Stone, I think it was top 100 guitar players or something like that. It was John Mayer, the Red Hot Chili Peppers guitar player, and Derek on the cover laying down.
I remember that cover, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So Derek, in that article, I think he cites my father as being one of his top influences. I think it was like Duane Allman, and then maybe it was Coltrane or something. I'm not sure. And then it was Ali Akbar Khan. I could be wrong, but my father's name was in there. So you can see how much his music, and not just Indian classical music, but my father's playing, the way he played that instrument, resonated with Derek and made its way into his creative spirit, and
yeah, sure. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of overlap in terms of like the style and sound of like the Sarode and the sitar and slide guitar, just the whole idea of being able to slide between notes and hit all those different sounds and tones. I'm sure you could speak to that more articulately than I am right now.
Yeah. No, you're right. So I mean, I think there's a video of Derek on the internet on YouTube where it's him talking about Indian classical music, and he takes one of my father's recordings, a theme that he played in the recordings, and you can see it in Derek doing it in his way that he would play that, and it totally takes on a whole different dimension when he puts it into like the blues slide kind of thing context. But you can see how it worked its way into his creative thinking. And there's a lot of similarities and things. I think the way he described it, and that was all just different ways of looking at the same problem, or looking at different problems, meaning the obstacles that we find on our instruments, or the ways of maneuvering around those instruments, conveying what we want, getting the most that we can get, and surpassing the limitations of any given instrument. That's the problem, like how do you get around there and how do you do that? Whereas as musicians, we're always trying to see how much we can get out of our one instrument, because we're not sitting there with a computer with endless samples that we can use. That's a different kind of music. We've got one instrument here. How do we make it speak? So.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear how, Derek also talks about how, I guess, some of his early influences, especially, were vocalists, Aretha Franklin, other gospel singers, and he was trying to take their melodies and put them into like slide guitar. And then to hear you talk about your training, how with the Indian classical music, it seems, popular or standard to start learning vocal and singing first. So was that I'm guessing that was helpful on the Sarode, having a little bit of a background in vocal training and singing. Did that help you did that translate into the Sarode playing and sort of that slide style sound that's very
Absolutely.
melodic and has a vocal quality in itself?
Absolutely, because it's single melodic phrasing. Like if you're taking Sarode or you're taking slide guitar, I mean, you can play some chords on it as well, but when you're playing those single lines that Derek does, or you do in our music, there's so much, you're trying to get the most, as we would call it, juice out of each note, or phrasing, or out of the phrase that you're doing. So Indian music created a way of really developing single melodic phrasing. The closest example, and whether it's instrumental or vocal music in India, it's all kindred, it's all related. The closest example in Western music is probably something like soul music, or gospel or soul, where they have these crazy, people call them runs, but they have
Right.
what we call as ornaments. So you have all these different things you're doing around a focal point, which is a note, but then you can combine it to another one and do all these different things. And you're really just like pulling out the juice of that. And it's like, it's soul. It's a good word for calling that music because you feel like it's coming from here. You hear that in Derek's playing, you hear that in Indian classical music. So they're all related in that way. They all are related in that way.
The fact that it has that soul and that vocal quality to it, whether it be a slide guitar, Sarode, it gives the music such like an emotional quality to it because it's like sounds like a voice. You feel it on a different level than you might, some other instruments or playing fretted guitar or kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
definitely a special sound. So how did these walls come together in the recording of that? All that they just reached out and said, "Hey, we got something we want you to work on." How did that all come together? Because that must have been, you know, 10, 15 years after you guys originally had first connected.
Yeah, I mean, we'd always talked about doing something, and then he one day, said, this was the Revelator album. So this was their first
Mhm.
Tedeschi Trucks Band album, and Derek, I think originally had played some Sarode on it himself, but he was more self-taught, really. He didn't like formally I don't think he ever took any formal lessons at our school. He just kind of got it and would play around and figured it out. To whatever extent he did. But he's like, I think originally he's like, we recorded this song. I played some Sarode on it. Do you think you could play the Sarode on it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Let's do it. So they gave it to me, and it was actually I think it's in D. And my instrument doesn't actually go to D unless you make a special Sarode that can go to that pitch. So, and the thing is with Indian instruments is you can't really shift keys. Once you have a key, that's the key you play in. You may change the combination of minor notes, major notes, whatever, sharp notes, but you'll never change the tonic. You never change the key. And the reason is we have all these sympathetic strings, these resonating strings. There's 25 strings on the instrument. So if you had to shift keys, you'd have to shift every one of those strings. And when you do that, the instrument is very temperamental, so it's not going to really sit very well. It needs to like be tuned to a new key and sit like overnight. So the highest we can go is C sharp, but it loses a lot of body on the instrument at that point. So D is like, good luck. You might start breaking some strings. So I could transpose and play, but it wouldn't make my instrument sonically resonate or respond as well as it should. The recording engineer that did that is also a sitar player and a longtime student of my father's. And I went to this really wonderful studio he was working at, and he's like, let's detune it, and you play to it, and then we'll bring it back up to pitch. And he's like, and we'll do it in a way where it doesn't degrade any of the quality of it, because there's ways of doing that where it degrades the quality of this instrument, and there's ways of doing it which it doesn't. And he's like, it'll take longer, but let me do it. Obviously, we're going to do it the right way. So he brought it down, and Susan was a little deeper in the voice because we just dropped, everything was dropped down like a whole from D to C. And I played to it, and I did all the things I wanted with the full range of sonic qualities my instrument could do in that key, because that's my normal key. And then we brought it back up. And that's kind of the story of how I recorded to that song. And it was all done. It was done remotely, which is so commonplace now. But like even then, we did that because I was not there with them when we did it. But for me, it doesn't matter. I just, when I hear something, I just get into the zone and the space. And Derek, they already had that beautiful, hook or melody already there. And so I added to it, and then I went and did some of my own things and tried to give a little bit of an intro that corresponded somewhat to like maybe kind of like a raga in our system of music. And then, kind of forgot about the raga as much and just started to play music on the Sarode, basically.
Very cool. Yeah, before I forget to say it, that is just such a special song, such an amazing song. And timeless and takes on different meanings for me over the years. Like that's definitely one of my favorite Tedeschi Trucks Band songs of all time. I mean, I say that about every song, and obviously for me, it's hard to pick one over the other. But like I really do appreciate that song, and if other fans say, "Oh, that's my favorite TTB song," I could totally get that. And when they do play that live, whether it's with yourself or kind of some acoustic versions that I know that they've sort of done, it's definitely a special thing when they break out these walls, because they don't really play it all that much like live. I'm sure you're aware. It's like
Yeah, I've seen like sometimes I see their set lists and different things like that, or footage of things or whatever, and I never see them do it. Yeah, I never see them do it.
very rarely. What did you think when you first? Because I'm sure they probably sent you the final track when everything was pieced together. What was your reaction to hearing that all complete?
Just happy, just joy, because like I love those guys. They're, like I said, they're friends before anything else, and to make music was special. It was nice, and so when we got to play together in person, it's even more. It just feels good. They're good people,
From
and
what I gather, yeah.
they're good people, and we yeah. So I mean, before anything else, it's that, and then it's just nice to hear us play together, because I know the music Sarode and my father's playing, all that has meant so much to Derek in his life, and Susan, and I just to have it all kind of come together. It wasn't my father, but it was me, and it was me for a reason, and we get to continue the story of this music and bring these styles together. And I hope that I'm sure at some point in time, me and Derek will explore this more, because there's a lot more to be explored between the sounds, and focus on that, a lot of what can be done. But until then, it's that's the song we have. And then we did the Fox shows, and that was just random too. It was just kind of like they always let me know when they're in town and playing, and it was like, you want to sit in? I was like, yeah, we never played this song live. Let's do it. So, and then after the first night, they were like, that was so, you want to come back tomorrow and do it? And I was like, sure. My wife and I, we didn't have our son at the time, so we could stay up as late as we wanted and didn't have to worry about all that. And my wife came, and my mother, who knows them as well, and my brother and sister, they came the first night, and my wife came both nights, and we hung out. And who else was there? I met Chris Robinson of the Brotherhood, the Black
Crows, yeah.
Right. I met him there at that concert too, and he was sitting in on some show. And then I was featured on one of their songs when they were, I don't know if they're still touring, but I was featured on one of those, the Chris Robinson Brotherhood band's albums too. So I met them through those guys, and I met a lot. I always have hung out with a lot of the people in the band and the different people throughout the years, and just nice to be around good people.
Yeah, for sure. I have no doubt that the quality of these walls recording and playing it live with Derek and Susan was made that much better, just from the fact that you had that relationship. I mean, that with them and a friendship with them. I think that just having those relationships just makes the chemistry better. I'm sure you could speak to this more than me, but I'm sure that was a big part of it. And the fact that like Derek again had like such an affinity for your father, that just makes everything that much more special. And I mean, as if Derek wasn't going to put 100% effort into everything, just the fact that he had such a respect for your father, like, that he's going to take the recording of these walls and putting that track together very, very seriously and give it the attention that he needs. And that just makes everything better, that there's such a history with all of you guys, I'm sure.
Definitely. And the thing about Derek's music that I respect is that one of the things is that he is of the same, cut from the same cloth, kind of as what my father and me, that kind of approach towards music, I guess I'll say. Like when you go see him play in concert, you don't see him running around staring at everybody in the audience and doing things. Look at me, look at me. You see Derek standing there playing his instrument with his head down because he's in the music. And my father and I, same thing. My father would sit down and he would he'd sit down and just he would be involved in the music, and the music commanded the attention. It's not the theatrics of what's going on, like what you're wearing and what the light's doing and what's this doing and what's that doing. The music guided the whole experience. Like, you don't need to see someone doing all this stuff because it's not about that. And when Derek starts playing, it's like when my father would play, it's like a prayer. It's like devotion to the craft, to the music, to the cosmos, connecting to something in the cosmos. And I feel like I don't know if we do it as much as someone as my father, but we have moments, and I'm speaking for myself. As for Derek, I think that that's what's important to him, is the music and not the theatrics of things. And I've always respected that about him, because it's a kindred thing, an aesthetic thing that I also got from my father. And I think that I really appreciate when music is the guiding thing. It's not about everything else, because you can always add that kind of stuff, but you can't teach someone to be genuinely humble and devoted to the sound first, and that's something I respect a lot.
No, I could definitely see it and hear that in TTB's music and Derek's music and your music, that there's definitely a spiritual quality to the music itself. And I think the TTB fans see that and respect that and know that the band always puts the music first. It's not really about anything else. Everything else is secondary to the music and serves the music. And like you're saying, the music itself and dedication to it is what everything is centered around. I know you're short on time. Is there anything else you want to mention? Stories, anecdotes worth mentioning about your music, what you're working on, or Susan and Derek? And I'll definitely let you, I'll give you the floor for that. Otherwise, we can kind of I'll give you the floor to plug and promote where people can find and follow you. But I wanted to give you a chance to say any other good stories or anecdotes while I got you here.
Yeah. I mean, it's well, as far as what I've got going on, I have a lot of different projects. That one with These Walls and all that was kind of around the time I started to not be a purist in the classical sense. Like, I really didn't want to fuse music because I really didn't like fusion music so much. My father used to call it confusion music. Whenever anybody would enter, what do you think about fusion music? Because it was like a whole thing people were doing. And he's like, confusion. I was like, okay. So I had that kind of thing in my head, and it was like, okay, well, and I didn't want to do that. So I had to find a way, which I think I have now, of being able to, what I like to call, collaborate with other musicians and bring the traditional music into different contexts. So the thing with Derek and Susan and the band, that was one of the earlier ways that I did that. And it was because they were who they were. As I knew them, I respected their craft like anything. As musicians, they were my friends. It just made sense. We were going to make music with integrity. We weren't making it just for the sake of doing it. It had a deep meaning to why they wanted Sarode on there and what I gave to it as well. So that all made sense. So going from there, all the other projects I've done that are fusion based, collaborative based, whatever, they just really have to maintain their integrity in both forms. Like, don't make that music just because be versed with the music. Know that you listen to that kind of music and then interact with it. Don't just say like, well, I'm going to do something with a flamenco guitar player and a hip hop artist because that's cool. Like, no, that's not the right way. And a lot of people have done that. And it's like, here's a didgeridoo player and a conga player and a this and a that. And it's like, yeah, you're jamming, but that's not necessarily anything anybody else needs to listen to. No offense, I mean, it gives you joy, great, enjoy that. And the people like it, they listen to it, great. For me, it was like, I collaborate with musicians and musical styles that I know about and I listen to. And I feel there can be a thoughtful, artistic, pushing the envelope type of thing going on. So I've been doing a lot more projects like that. And I have a project with Western String Quartet that's coming out soon. And, you know, I have a new album that's contemporary music because I also am a producer. So I have all the machines and things like that. And I make music for films and different stuff like that, and you know, it's scoring, and I have made beats for many years, and I have projects with people that are really, you know, good independent underground hip hop musicians, producers and MCs and all that stuff, and I spent a lot of time in that world. So it's like whatever I do, it's like I want to be more versed in those worlds that I'm bringing my instrument into. And I feel like whatever I do with my instrument, it's a continuation of telling the story that my father and grandfather were telling, but bringing it into modern times, into different contexts. My father used to always say, when anyone would compliment him, you know, he was a god to all these people, but he would always just say, I'm just a messenger of my father. So my father is the one. Say good things about him, you know. So I feel the same thing about my father. So I'm a messenger of both of them, and I'm trying to bring that message into different contexts, you know, and push the envelope and speak with this, bring this character, which is my instrument, this traditional thing, into all these different ways. And it's going to be unique because my upbringing was unique to begin with, and my musical influences and styles are unique. So that's what's going on. You know, I'm all over social media and alimkhan.com. And you can find me on all the social media things for my albums and whatnot. And for anybody that's interested in Indian classical music, like I was saying at the beginning of this interview, this is my father's centennial year. So through our school, the Ali Akbar College of Music, we're doing a year-long thing of virtual concerts. We wanted to do live ones. His memory deserves that. We probably will try to later in the year when it gets a little bit safer, but we wanted to make sure there was something we were doing no matter what. So we got virtual concerts from some of the best Indian musicians shot in India, here, all over. They'll be monthly. There'll be a book coming out on my father's quotes, musings of a master musician, a free Raga radio broadcast, which will be a constant stream of my father's music for the entire year, 24/7. It's all going to be on aliakbarkhan.com. So that's very cool stuff, and some really great music ahead for this year, starting on the 16th of this month, this Saturday, actually. And as for Derek and Susan, you know, they're busy as ever, it looks like, right?
I think so. They have a bunch of new stuff coming out this year, from what I gather. A lot of original music is coming, and of course they got their tours and stuff. So plenty of good stuff to look forward to on their end, on your end. I really appreciate the time and the stories and everything. It means a lot to me. These walls means a lot to me. It's great stuff, and you have definitely a great head on your shoulders, it seems like, and a great attitude about an outlook, and I respect the responsibility that you take on as far as like continuing this legacy of music in your family. That's very cool and special.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing me on and chatting and letting me talk a little bit about my music and journey.
Oh, for sure. I got to see you live sometime, either up in the Bay Area. I got to get up there and at least maybe visit the school and check it out. That would be cool. Just to
Where are you based?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, you're in Los Angeles. That's close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I come to well, since the pandemic, I haven't been coming as often, but I will keep you posted for the next time I come that way.
Yeah, I'll look out for it. I follow you. I'm sure you'll post, and I'll hopefully check you out one of these days for sure. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day, and let's talk more soon.
All right. Take care, man.
Oh, you got it. Later. So there you go. Episode 73 with Ali Khan. That was fun, and I really appreciate Ali taking the time. I could definitely see the connection between Ali and TTB and how they both always put the music first. Always. I also wanted to mention that Ali also wanted me to let you guys know that any slide guitar players who are interested in learning more about Indian music can always contact him or his school for lessons. He mentioned to me after we recorded that a number of players over the years have discovered him through these walls and Tedeschi Trucks Band and ended up studying with him afterward for years. So definitely check out alimkhan.com. or aacm.org, or definitely you'll want to follow Alam on Instagram as well. Anyway, for now, hope everyone is doing okay out there. Please check out Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram. That's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. Please remember to tap subscribe or follow on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. If you're watching, please subscribe on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. That is helpful, as are positive reviews on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. That is also helpful to the podcast. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Adam Choit. TTB themselves, their official website is TedeschiTrucksBand.com. People We Love Podcast.com is my other podcast. But I think that's about all I got for today. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it as always. And let's talk soon. Peace.